This is the Discover Seward County podcast, where we explore the people and places that make Seward County great. All right, welcome back. We are here with the one and only. Do you go by Robert or Robbie professionally?
I go by Robbie.
Okay, so Robbie McEwen, Seward resident. How did you get to be in Seward, Robbie?
My wife and I moved to Seward the year after we got married. So we got married in 2012 and then moved to Seward in the end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And we moved from Lincoln. We'd lived in Lincoln for a long time, but we were looking for more house. We wanted to have kids. We wanted a nice school district. And so we did have, my wife's cousin has lived in Seward for a long time, and so she encouraged us to come check out houses down here. And we ended up buying an old property on North Columbia with the idea of, we watch a lot of HGTV. We can fix this thing up. And still in process.
That's what they don't show you on HGTV.
Yeah. Chip and Joanna, it's done in like 60 minutes. Here, it's 14 years later. It's like, we'll get to that.
I remember seeing an interview with, this is obviously not what we're talking about today. I saw they did an interview and somebody asked them what would you suggest to people who want to get into flipping houses? And Chip just went, don't.
It's good advice.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Absolutely. So we're kind of similar. I don't really have any direct ties to Seward, and we kind of just ended up here. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Really what we wanted to get a chance to chat about. We've known each other for a while. Our kids are in the same grade.
Yep.
I coached Marlo in basketball, and then we spent a lot of time at softball fields this summer. I found out you work at Nebraska Appleseed in Lincoln, and I got to tell you, I knew who they were just because I try to keep my finger on the pulse of, nonprofits and people doing what I think is really cool work. So few people know about Appleseed.
Yeah.
Why is that? And if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about what the organization does and then why it kind of flies under the radar, you think?
Yeah. So a little bit of background about Appleseed. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan public interest law and advocacy organization. And it's really kind of interesting how Appleseed is a network and an organization started. So back in the mid-1990s, there was this thing called Legal Services Corporation, and they would do systemic advocacy. So they were like a legal aid, and they would represent people directly, but they would do class action lawsuits. They would do public policy work. Really, after the Great Society of the 1960s, Legal Services Corporation did a lot of work doing systemic advocacy. And in the mid-1990s, Congress is in control of Legal Services Corporation. They modified the funding structure, said you can't do that anymore. And so as a result of that, it was actually Ralph Nader and a bunch of his Harvard Law alumni got together and started the Appleseed Network nationally. And Nebraska Appleseed started actually in 1996, so we're coming up on our 30th anniversary. Our founder, Milo Mumgard, started Nebraska Appleseed out of his basement in the mid-1990s. He came from farm services in Texas, doing legal work down there. And so we started in 1996 with 2 employees, and now we are almost at 50 employees.
Wow.
And so we've grown quite a bit over the years. But what we really do and focus on is doing systemic advocacy at the policy level, the legal level, and then we do a lot of work out in the community too. So those are really our 3 primary advocacy tools. We do our work where we think it can do the most good, whether that's the courthouse, the state house, or just out in the community. And so that takes a wide sort of array of things. I'm the legal director at Appleseed. I've been the legal director since 2017, and I started actually at Appleseed as a law student during my second year of law school as a law clerk there. And I came up through our child welfare program. It's one of the programs that we do have at Appleseed. We really have 4 core program areas. We have a child welfare program focusing on foster care advocacy. We have an economic justice program that focuses on historically a lot of public benefits work, so TANF and SNAP. We have a healthcare access program that does a lot of work with Medicaid, and then we have an immigrants and communities program that does a lot of legal work really with worker safety and OSHA regulations, a lot of work in the meatpacking industry. And so those are really our top level sort of programs that we have. And so we do a lot of work at the state legislature. Even at Congress, we do federal advocacy in Congress. Part of my role as legal director, we do complex class action litigation, and we use that as a systemic advocacy tool when systems are not really serving the folks that they're meant to be serving. And then our organizing work takes a sort of wide array of things. It can look like leadership training or know your rights training, sort of strength building out in the community. And it's actually really interesting. So why do people not really know about Appleseed? We fly under the radar quite a bit. So we sort of, as a nonpartisan organization, we don't really take sides politically. We work on issues, and so we work across the aisle politically, especially at the state legislature. And we sort of are nerdy policy wonks. And so if I get wonky talking about any stuff and be like, blah, 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 and then in 1996 there was this law passed, that's why people don't know who we are sometimes. But it's interesting with the people that do know who we are, they'll intersect with us as organizers, and then they'll be like, well, we didn't know you guys were lawyers doing legal work. And then a lot of people at the legislature will see us up there writing bills and working with senators to pass legislation, and they won't know about the other parts of our work. So yeah, we're really sort of a hidden gem. We're the largest Appleseed center in the country. We're sort of a loosely affiliated network. So we don't really all work on the same issues. We're not like a strong top-down type of national org that sort of sends directives out to states to what to do. We really are state-based, and so we started, in 1996 with just seed funding. It was, I think, $10,000 was the national seed funding, and the whole goal was states figure out what is most important in your area, you guys go work on it, and then that is just really the start of your nonprofit. So that's a very quick and dirty overview of almost the last 30 years, but lots of work being done for sure.
Yeah, well, and I think you guys should never apologize for being policy wonks and nerdy about it, because I think we need nerdy, right? We need less salacious politics, and we need let's look at the data and let's see who's. So I'm curious, is flying under the radar, is that by design? Do you guys kind of like being a little bit under the radar and real G's move in silence sort of a thing?
I mean, sometimes yes, bad boys move in silence.
Exactly right.
I think a lot of times it can be really helpful and engaging, and especially in Nebraska, historically as a nonpartisan legislature, working across the aisle and not really, again, advocating on candidates, but issues allows us to work with people on, again, the data, facts, and again, we've worked with people from all political stripes. And so in Nebraska, especially if you're going to advocate for and on behalf of low-income groups or on more progressive issues, it's tricky to do that if you don't have consensus.
Yeah, for sure.
So we are consensus builders by nature as an organization.
God bless you. I mean,
we try.
Man, we just need more of that. I'm curious how. I mean, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody to say these are weird. The last 10, 12, 14 has been weird, right? For a lot of reasons, politically, socioeconomically. We had COVID that happened, and how has the work changed kind of since you've been doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It has changed pretty dramatically. And COVID, I think, is a really good example of sort of the change in nature of, I guess, the political landscape, but also just the nature of the work that we do. So a lot of it remains consistent, but there has been, I think, a feeling of, again, nationally, and I think you'll see some of this locally too, a lot more heated political rhetoric in the last 5 to 10 years than probably historically, and especially at the Nebraska legislature. If you just pick up the paper, there's a fight going on almost every other day, and it makes it difficult to pass issues that, again, both sides can come to an agreement on if things are being held up. And so that has, I think, made our public policy work a lot more tricky. The legal work, again, I'll go wonky here for a second, but court precedent ain't what it used to be. The times are a changing. And so a lot of the work that we do is focused on civil rights litigation, so Section 1983. And that's really seen a legal movement since the early to mid 2000s. And it becomes a little bit more difficult to try and bring that type of litigation. And also, again, wonky, but a lot of the class action work that we do, the federal precedents that have existed are sort of narrowing the ability to bring class actions. And it's weird. In the legal work that we do, some people question, like, are you a real lawyer, Robbie? So it's weird because I've never sued anybody for money. That's not really the work that we do at Appleseed. We don't sue people for damages. We don't charge our clients money. And so I don't charge people money and I don't sue people for money. Almost every single one of our cases has been really, we think the law says this, government, you should do this. And so we don't actually seek government damages of any sort of kind. We really just seek that injunctive type of relief. So that's a little bit different than most lawyers. But that work has gotten, I think, harder over the last 10 years than it has been for the previous 40 or 50.
Is that largely just because of the change in rhetoric and just general attitudes?
I think the change in the precedent, I think, has largely been, it's been a slower moving shift on the legal side than the policy side. That's a little bit more long-standing than COVID with the sort of narrowing of Section 1983 litigation, and then the federal class action rule is Rule 23. There's a famous case, Walmart v. Dukes, that sort of narrowed the ability of class action litigation to proceed. And so those are sort of the boundaries that we are living within now. It's harder to bring class action cases. It's harder to bring civil rights types of cases. And on the policy side, sometimes it can be harder to get work done when people are very upset with each other.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious with the changes that you've seen. Has there been a change in the way the work you do is perceived publicly? I mean, we just established you guys kind of fly under the radar, but how, when people do become aware of Appleseed, what is is there a general reaction to it, or are people kind of meh? Because people don't, I mean, just as a society, right, we're a mile wide and an inch deep. Nobody really gets into the details or to look into the data on anything. But what kind of, out in the wild, what kind of response do you guys get?
Usually pretty positive, or just not super knowledgeable about I work at Appleseed. And again, we work on a lot of pretty progressive issues, and Nebraska's not the most progressive place to have public policy work done. And so it's sort of weird because I'll almost be bashful about mentioning it. It's I work at Nebraska Appleseed, not knowing how people feel about public benefits or Medicaid or SNAP or youth and foster care. And most of the time people are oh, I've heard about Appleseed. You guys do really good work. It's thanks.
That's the weird thing, right? Is that rhetoric aside, which is very difficult to do, obviously, but when you actually go out there in the wild, you talk to people, 70% of people agree on 70% of stuff. Mm-hmm. There's a much broader coalition than I think what we see in the headlines and what the rhetoric we see would have us believe. I think most of us are aligned a lot more closely than we realize.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good example, so for example, one of the policy and legal things that I've worked on quite a bit in my career is Medicaid. And so Medicaid is the largest insurer of Nebraskans just generally. It insures low-income Nebraskans across all stripes. So one of the things that we do at Appleseed also in the policy spheres, we work on ballot advocacy, ballot issues. And so when Medicaid expanded in 2018 in Nebraska, that was really a lot of our work to expand that. And we've also done raising the minimum wage, banning payday lenders from operating in the state, paid sick leave. Those were all measures that Appleseed led on. Which again, broad stripes. Nebraska has a sort of populist history, and people tend to support those types of issues. But
this has been a purple state for a really long time.
Yeah,
it's only Nebraska and Iowa, right? It's pretty recent that they go super strong in any one direction.
It absolutely is. And yeah, Medicaid is a good example of things that touch lots of folks that nobody really thinks about. There's the top level rhetoric of Medicaid. That's a public entitlement. It's a government program to provide health care to low-income people. And so there's the top-level rhetoric, cut Medicaid. But when you really sort of break it down in its components, you're like, Medicaid covers kids in foster care. Medicare covers a lot of older folks that are in like high needs nursing home facilities, the dual eligible population. Medicaid, now that we have expansion, the state covers a lot of people, college students. And so Medicaid eligibility really touches a lot of folks that nobody really sort of thinks about or breaks down into the individual components if you have a top-level rhetoric of we need to cut this entitlement program. And then there's and this is not just a Nebraska problem, but I think society has a problem in engaging in long-term policy thinking when we are very short-term as a species. And so thinking about like the downstream consequences of, well, what happens when you take health care away from kids or youth in care or
veterans?
Yeah. You start to look at the unintended consequences of all they can't access mental health care, behavioral health care, physical health care in the same way. You start to lose rural hospitals, which again are, now that the recent actions at Congress, the Big Beautiful Bill have passed, there have already, I think, been 3 rural hospitals in Nebraska that have closed because, again, those hospitals depend on like receiving funding from people, including the Medicaid program, to operate. And so lack of access to care becomes an issue that is going to have consequences for decades.
Right. Yeah, you're right. In general, even in the business, the marketing world, you think of like second, third order consequences to things. Like in general, people are just, we as a species are just not good at it. We're very, we're just very immediate.
Yeah, 1 to 2 years down the road, no problem. We can deal with those consequences. You start to pull strings that are going to have some effects 20 to 30 years from now.
Yeah,
that's a future problem.
Do a pre-mortem on
that's
what
my
we're
kids'
doing.
problem. They can deal with that.
Exactly. Well, and that's like a constant thing that I'm thinking. I'm getting to, I'll be hitting 40 here before too long, and so like I'm thinking of like I've been working full time since I was 16. So like, over half my life. My brain sort of starts shifting to, I got about half of my working life left, probably, thereabouts. What kind of effort am I putting in to leave my kids a better world? And like, how uncommon is like a big, that big picture, especially I'm curious, like in the legal system, in the work that you guys do day in and day out, is it present there, or is it like is it just like an endemic thing that humans are just bad at long-term thinking?
I think it's an endemic thing, but in the public policy legal space, it is especially bad.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear it was better.
I think in the political and legal space, the short-term consequences are especially prescient because people need to run for re-election. It's a lot harder to sell re-election as like, this is really going to be great 30 years from now versus I see you struggling here and now. This is an immediate solution to your problem. And so in that space in particular, I think it's especially difficult to...
Election cycles keep getting shorter and shorter, don't they?
They do. Yeah.
It feels like whoever the president is, it feels like they legislate for about 6 months to a year, and then they start the campaign trail again, either for themselves or whoever
starts over again.
It really does. I'm reminded, like, was it? I don't know, the idiom, the sort of that a society grows great when men plant trees, the shade of which they will never enjoy. Right? Like, Can we sow a seed, figuratively or literally, for the next generation? And it just seems like whatever side of the political spectrum or wherever you land in it, it seems like we've just gotten bad at that.
Yeah.
And maybe we were never good at it. I don't know. But it certainly doesn't seem, as I've more and more into adulthood and you become more and more aware of the things around, and especially once you have kids, you start realizing like, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on that either will affect them directly or can at some point. You realize, man, we are not great at this.
Yeah, it's hard, I think, especially in the type of work that we do. I'll give you an example of the legal and policy work that we do is not necessarily like an immediate return or satisfaction. A lot of the things that we work on take like an entire decade to do. So, for example, one of the things that I worked on or started working on when I was at Appleseed in the staff attorney position in the child welfare program was the Bridge to Independence program. So Nebraska, so I'll tell the whole public policy story, and again, getting wonky, but in 2008, under President Bush, Congress passed the Fostering Connections Act, which allowed states to extend the foster care age of their systems up to age 21. After years of research shows that like 19-year-old kids that did not have parents and do not have those supports don't do well when you just like open the door and say, you're free into the world.
You're the 20, good luck. Yeah.
I still would not have been okay if I was just like kicked out at 19 with nothing. And so we, as a state, took a lot of the research about homelessness and access to care issues, like healthcare issues that came up in Nebraska's foster care system. And in 2012, we began the process of doing our community organizing work. We actually went out and had forums, interviewed hundreds of former foster youth in Nebraska about extending our system to the age of 21 and what that should look like in a youth sort of forward way. And so we did that. Over 2 legislative sessions, we expanded our foster care system to the age of 21 under the Bridge to Independence program. It was great. It provides stipends to youth in foster care. It also provides that sort of casework support, and so that was wonderful. Extend the foster care age to 21 in our state. And at the same time, the Affordable Care Act passed while we were a little bit before that, but one of the things that did was youth in foster care could stay on Medicaid until 26 because they could not stay on their parents' insurance because they aged out of foster care. Yeah. And so it was an interesting sort of wonky thing that we discovered with combining those two things. We found that there was a lot of youth that were in a really positive guardianship situation where they were just blowing up those guardianships. Their attorneys were when they were 18, in Nebraska, age of majority is 19 or 17, in order to put those kids back into foster care at age 19 so that then they could age out of foster care at 19 and then access Medicaid until they were 26 because they really needed that health care. And so we identified that and we're like, well, maybe we could fix that. And so we, again, amended. We went back to the legislature, amended the Bridge to Independence program, allowed youth that were in that situation to voluntarily submit themselves back into foster care after their guardianship situation ended legally at 19 because they couldn't go on their guardian's insurance. And then it passed. It was great. Those youth were able to then put themselves into voluntary foster care until 21 to try and access health care until they were 26, but the state refused to implement it, so we had to sue them over the course of 2 years. We won, and all of that took about 9 years. And so that sort of minuscule thing of this disincentive to permanency for youth and guardianships, really sort of nuanced, kind of, and I think it's a really important issue, but again, not changing the entire world, but that sort of one small slice took 9 years to do. This was not go to court, file it, done next week, or go to the legislature and that it's done in 3 months. This took 9 years to do. But I believe still we're the only state in the country that sort of fixed that slice or disincentive to permanency. But it's a good example of how the public policy and the legal work we do sort of meld or work together to try and identify those systemic problems. So kids can't have loving families or access care. It'll take a decade to fix that slice.
Wow. Are there any quick fixes, quick wins that you guys come up against, or is it all, are you dealing on time scales?
I don't know if I have had any. Well, sometimes the administrative advocacy that we can do a lot in our community organizing space can have some quicker wins. And so a couple of years ago, there was this thing called the Summer EBT program where youth were able to like get additional funding for food supports during the summer. Nebraska initially was going to decline that program, and we did a community petition initiative with our economic justice team and petitioned the governor to change his feelings about it, and he did. And so we were able to, I think that one only took 3 months before Nebraska reversed course. So that was quicker.
Much quicker.
Yeah.
3 months versus 9 years.
Right.
It's, you for a lot of reasons, I've been doing marketing. I call myself a reluctant marketer just because marketing, I think, can also, it can equally be a force for good and a force for just complete, utter evil. But just because it simplifies things way too far. Marketing is reductive in its nature. And if you look at, general attention span, literacy level, right? And we're all going the wrong way, in my opinion. And so, but it's so interesting that when you actually get down into the nitty gritty of what you guys are advocating for and working for, the phrase progressive can be kind of weighted.
Yeah.
But when you actually talk about like, we're actually trying to help foster kids have access to health care for longer. There are very few people who are on the other side of that.
I have not met someone yet who's not said,
right.
Yes, youth in foster care, kids that age out should not have access to health care.
Right. And
nobody's willing to say that out loud.
Yeah. Screw them foster kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Nobody takes that position.
Or when it comes to the SNAP benefits, like for the people you actually know, right? When you actually talk about like, are there ways as a community, as a country, we should spend money more responsibly? 1,000,000%. But that doesn't normally mean taking food out of people's mouths.
Yeah.
And most everybody, I think, agrees on that. So like the way that politics and policy has been marketed to be so reductive instead of instructive, and like, let's actually have like a meaningful, constructive conversation around some of these topics, it just doesn't happen as much. And it bums me out, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And I'm sure my bummer is on a scale of magnitude lower than yours when it comes to like, this is what you do day in and day out.
It's a pretty bummer of a time. It's been 2025 so far has been real interest. Stuff is moving fast. Lots of executive orders, and then the big beautiful bill obviously just passed. And so SNAP is again a really good example of a program that's been relatively successful and part of the Farm Bill for a long time, being really dramatically altered. And again, the concern that we organizationally have is this is going to mean lots fewer people having access to food supports. And historically, the evidence is there. So a good example, one of the things that is changing after the big beautiful bill is work requirements, which on its face does not sound that crazy. Is people will like have to go to work in order to get SNAP benefits. But we have a historical example of when cash assistance was modified in the mid-90s, again by Congress to put work requirements on the former cash program, ADC, for TANF, like the roles cut off dramatically. And just top level thinking about it, like if you just think about yourself having to fill out government paperwork, your eyes just start to glaze over. Regardless if I have like a job or not, am I going to spend 5 hours filling out paperwork a month to like get this benefit? Mm-hmm. Maybe. And then the processing of it, again, with Nebraska's Employment First program, which does cash assistance and has had these work requirements since the mid-90s when Congress changed it, I've seen many, many issues with its actual implementation, which causes people to not try for it or to be improperly kicked off or just not really make it through the bureaucracy. So it's interesting because it's adding 5 additional layers of bureaucracy to accessing food, which again is sort of counterintuitive. Again, as a marketer, they're not marketing this as like, let's add more bureaucracy.
Right.
And that it does shift a lot of the funding from, again, SNAP, a program that largely from the federal government to the state. So Nebraska is going to have to deal with this in the legislative session is what do we do now with SNAP that the feds aren't going to cover as much. Mm-hmm. So it complicates things.
It does.
And again, kids are the ones that are benefiting from this is I have access to food. Again, nobody takes the position it's like those kids shouldn't eat healthy food.
Right. What you monster? You
yeah.
eat kids' food? How dare you?
Nobody takes that position.
Yeah, man. I mean, so as you do your work, as you were out there, what would you like people to know about Appleseed? Like, how can, as much as we can, encourage people to thoughtfully engage? How can they do that? Or how can they kind of, aside from visiting the Appleseed website and seeing what you guys are doing, what's something that you would want people to take away knowing about the work you guys do?
Yeah, I think come to our website, check out our Facebook. Our comms team is really good on all the socials. That is not my job, so I don't do that. They're really good. But it is a really nice way to sort of stay plugged into the goings on, like around the state with all of these issues. And so, again, they do a really nice job of not being super wonky, top level. This is what the legislature is doing. And again, it makes it easier to plug into those sorts of issues than I think a lot of people are not super plugged in. Most people don't even know who like their representative at the legislature is. But right. We make it pretty simple to follow along and see what's going on and how it actually impacts everyday Nebraskans.
Yeah, and I think, I don't think either of us would say anybody needs to they don't need to be at the level of the legal director of an advocacy organization, but it is good to understand more about what's happening and how any changes, whether you love them or you hate them, how it will impact your community and the people you know and the people who use these programs day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people can come read our legal briefs in any of our cases if they want to, but the socials are a little bit easier to digest.
Well, awesome. Robbie, thank you so much. Hope you have we'll have you back sometime. We can talk more. Thank you for your time. Yeah. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the work you guys are doing for all of Nebraska.
Yeah, anytime. This is great.
Thanks, Rob. This episode of the Discover Seward County podcast was brought to you by Hughes Brothers, the Seward County Visitors Bureau, Union Bank and Trust, PetSource, GBE, and Lincoln Premium Poultry.